I love music and I love art, and I especially love art made for the music. But we can all agree that when it comes to genres, subgenres, and subcultures, that they tend to fall victim to having specific imagery represent each thing, genre, subculture, whatever you want to say. Country obviously has its notorious cars, trucks, women, guy with a cowboy hat drinking whiskey next to a car or a truck. And rock kind of has, depending on which subgenre of rock you're looking at, might have a women in a car, or a guy drinking. And then, pop and rap tend to have like the same luxurious representation on covers. Again, specifically like with more expensive stuff, expensive cars, probably a mansion. But today I want to talk about specifically indie rock, the indie side of album covers, and how a lot of them are boring. Now, obviously, depending on which year you're looking at, obviously, the 90s and even early 2000s had some great stuff. But once we start getting into more really indie sleaze after indie sleaze, in terms of like I know some people tend to use like Hollister as an example, but yeah, like Hollister, maybe Forever 21. I don't know which store, American Eagle, those stores, whatever playlist, whatever would be on those stores' playlists. I'm gonna associate that with like there's commercial indie, and then there's like the other indie stuff, which could be like run for cover or run for cover adjacent stuff. You can talk about singular artists like Phoebe Bridgers, Julian Baker, and you could look Tomberlin. You could look more towards like band stuff, such as like I don't know, Future Teens. But then we started getting into specific subcultures too, like emo stuff, which again I want to try to keep it specific to radio / TikTok popular indie stuff. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through a playlist of whatever popular indie rock there is, and we're going to judge these album covers based on how boring they actually are. And we're going to do that for a while until I feel like I run out of time. So let's get started. So when I think of indie, I think of abstract art trying too hard to be different, or I think of low effort picture / art trying to be different. Now, an easy thing that I like when it comes to this Kings of Leon album, I think it looks fine from a distance, but then you look at it and you're like, oh, they blended the light pole through the wall. Again, trying to be different. Cosplay in the 50s, but I guess like that one beer difference kind of adds a little bit to it. But I don't think it really does anything for the album itself, if I'm being honest. Scrolling down here. Where is it? There it is. We have this piece of garbage. Okay, look. This is like a perfect example of not what to do. So, out of anything, you decide to go with this weird ass drawing that could have been done by, I don't know, an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, maybe. Hell, you could have even traced it. All for the sake of, yeah, I'm different. I make different art that isn't mainstream. That's kind of the first vibe that I got from this. And this is kind of the vibe that I'm going for in terms of, like, this is what we're looking for. However, when we get into more commercial stuff, then it kind of gets boring. For example, this. We have a song that sounds like surfing at the beach. Oh, okay, get me a Volkswagen bus and a surfboard, and what is that? A towel. Now, okay, the one thing I will give credit for this album art is the design on the ground. That's the one thing that I'll say, okay, yeah, you know what, sure. Hell, if you wanted to just take a picture of just the art on the ground, fine. But this is when we start getting into more the commercial side. Indie was like, oh yeah, You're cosplaying being a hipster at this point. Moving down more, I obviously love this band, but I gotta say that this and when we get to Cage the Elephant, like that's kind of what I associate commercial indie. This like whatever you can do watercolor painting, whatever this kind of painting of a person, and then you have this weird groovy I don't know what to like 70s kind of inspired font on it. And then we got the wallows. And then I look at this and I'm like, oh my God, yeah. What can we do for this photo? We're going to take a picture of someone that's like having a nervous breakdown. Or just not, no, that's giving them credit. We're going to take a picture of someone leaned over and everybody's going to assume that they're having a nervous breakdown or that they're uncomfortable. Obviously, it matches the vibe that this is going for. But I genuinely think that this whenever someone takes the photo and puts it behind a colorful background or a background of any color, and I am guilty of this, I have done this before, I feel like there's definitely ways of doing it, and this is whenever it's white though, that's when I'm like, yeah. I mean, I like the font. The font looks good. But I feel like this photo would have made more sense if it was just the photo, or the cover art specifically. If it was just the photo and then different font, maybe you could have used the font on there. I don't know. Maybe make it change the color of the font a little bit. But I think this art would have been better if the photo was large and the font was like whatever. We'll see. You'd see how the font would look. Going down more. This is where I have more beef. This is kind of like the excelled version of what I was talking about with the Bryce whatever one. So this is just like this is cosplaying the friggin' 50s. So like you can't tell me otherwise. Just like we're going for rip off generic band from the 70s / 60s album cover. We're gonna do that, and that's what this is. I don't have much to say about this one as outside of this is basically just Cage the Elephant. Like when I associate what Cage the Elephant's music would like art to go with Cage the Elephant, this is what I associate with. And then we get to... Alright, this one is just like, you are trying way too hard to be different, my friend. Yeah, we'll have a bike standing up on the road. Like, look, I like photo blending, and I don't really do Photoshop, and I think Photoshop can, produce some really cool stuff. But again, this is like automatically what I associate indie with, just like trying to be different. We're gonna have a bike in the middle of the road. Next like with a tunnel in the background. And I honestly feel like at this point it's kind of basically just like ask ChatGPT to come up with an idea for an indie album cover, and that's what you get. And then we get to like this is another Cage the Elephant thing, and I will say in this case I do like where the photo is and the overall presentation way better than the Wallows one. However, when I think of Cage the Elephant, the way this photo is taken, that's Cage the Elephant. Friggin' have a little bit of color, have some gray, like that's Cage the Elephant. And it really describes this album in terms of tonality. But I will say that, like, when the group love Cage the Elephant, indie stuff is just, that's kind of that's the not the great side of indie. Another Wallows one. Yeah, you can tell it's by the Wallows because they're doing the same damn thing. Although this time, if my eyesight was a little bit worse, I wouldn't be able to read that. Alright, back to talking about the friggin' art school stuff. So, like, this is the specific category of indie where it's just like the art school student. Now, I don't know this could have been made by anybody, but if you are an indie artist, which this is a band, but if you are an indie artist and you also do art, it makes it like be like, oh, I'll do the cover myself. I do that, but this is just high school art as the album cover. Hell, not even no, sorry, that's giving a credit. This is like after school program. This is an after school program craft as the album cover. And you can't tell me otherwise. There's so much more you could have done, and you went with this. And this is a band. If this was an artist, I'd give them a little bit more credit because, who knows, they could have made it. But no, this is a friggin' band, and they decided to go with this awful cover. All right. For me, this is the epitome, like at least in high school, this is the epitome of what I deemed indie to be, or specifically the category of bedroom indie. This photo right here, this is what I always, basically being a teenager pretty much up until now, I question like the different subcategories of different arts and whatever for indie, but through high school, this image alone summons up everything to do with my issues with indie. It's just this damn photo right here. I think it's a pretty cool photo. I'll be honest, I think it's a really cool photo. But when the 2014, I believe, was when a lot of the vintage filters started taking off. And that for me kind of just poisoned more of the scene with indie, because all you really need to do to be an indie artist is take a generic photo and throw in a vintage filter, and then you can put it for your album art, or you can put it for EP or single, whatever. Now, I will admit, in this case, I think that a lot of bands that came after this band looked at this cover and be like, oh yeah, we're going to make music that sounds like that, and we're going to be going for that same exact vibe. Now, for me, I have a lot of issues when it comes to projects that inspire other projects to basically ruin the legacy of that one project. In this case, there's not much I can really say outside of I love this band. The song is the song Freak is a good song, but like there's no one that will outdo Surf Girls. But I will say that photo is notorious for so many travesties within the indie scene. I'll be honest, I don't know if I should even talk about this, because if I look at this photo, I could associate this photo with any other genre except for country. I could think of this as a rock album. I could think of this as a pop album. I could think of this as a rap album. I could think of this as an electronic album. There's just nothing here that's defying the specific subculture or genre. All right. There's the other subsection of specifically when it comes to indie stuff is using old photographs, specifically writing on those old photographs. And I will admit that a lot of the times that I ended up doing art, I've thought about doing that, but it's so overdone. And at this point, like, come on, man, there's other ways of doing art. I get it makes sense for the first project, or I guess if you like, I can kind of understand if you want to do like a more, I guess, storytelling of a traumatic event or something. But a lot of the time it's just done for the sake of we're quirky, we're using this because we're an indie artist slash band. So the Walls decided to grow up and instead go for, I'm going to call this what it is. This is like if using my editing software I take a photo that I took, and then using my editing software, I'll form a friggin' frame around it, and then I just pick the most generic indie ass font and just put it in the middle and call it a day. And it just, oh my god, man. It's stuff like this. This is so fucking lazy. You could have done anything else. Why do this? This is so bad. Like, this is so, oh man. Hire me to do your friggin' art. I'll do it. I'll do a better job than whatever this is. This is awful. All right. So within I do have some. I can credit myself because I am award-winning photographer, and I will say that when it comes to photography and actually like coming up with ideas for album art just through photography alone is something that I've definitely thought about. I've thought about, you know what? I'll freaking do it. I'll do it just in representation of this. Take a picture of something in your house that looks like it could be an album cover and make it your album cover. And I will say that while I am annoyed by this, while I'm annoyed by how simplistic the idea is, it might look good. It might look good to the point where it actually does encapsulate what the album is trying to do. For an example, I don't remember what the name of the cover is, but I'm going to put it here for an example. It doesn't make any sense, but when you listen at face value, but when you listen to the music, you kind of come up with your own interpretation of why they chose that cover. And I will say that it's something that it's a love-hate relationship, I'll say. These covers right here, love-hate relationship. So this is a weird one because you can put this for literally any genre except for country, and I wouldn't know what it is. The idea of it reminds me of like Odd Future, Adult Swim bumper, like style art, which is fine. I do think that it's not used to the best of their ability whenever it is used. I feel like there are a lot of better ways to do this. Maybe, doing something that's more exciting than just like spilled milk. Like, come on, man. And I guess this is a duo or a trio. If it was an artist, it's like whatever. That's kind of what I kind of associate this stuff specifically with, either artists or singles for bands that are like releasing modern music rather than just like, which again, this is a single, but like this is kind of what I'm talking about by the boringness, specifically the modern boringness of single covers. Like, this is a perfect example. There's a lot more you could have done with this art, and you decide to go with something boring. The song's called All Over. Spilled Milk is a good example, I guess, but like maybe add more to the photo than just milk spilled. All right, we're gonna end off on. I was actually not expecting to see this here because this is technically an emo album, but we're gonna end off on something that I'll talk about, considering that I brought it up. Now, this album to me is a great example of not knowing what to think of it at first glance because you see the picture. It is looking at a mirror that's in focus of whatever's behind. Now, this album in general is basically about questioning death, I would say. That's kind of really the best way to describe it. The last track, everything about it is just basically questioning your existence and, wondering if there's an afterlife. And even, I believe, if I remember correctly, on like the one of the songs, it's just kind of taught like asking the question about to people about like what do you think about death and stuff like that. That's kind of how I summarize the telling of this album, and this album is actually on my Topster. I've not heard any other album that's like this. This is a really good indie album, but talking about the cover itself, there's not much I can say that doesn't contradict what I said already. This is a perfect example of whenever you listen to the album, you come up with your own conclusion for why they chose this cover. Now, with other songs, specifically commercial songs, you don't get that. You get like, oh yeah, they chose from 4 different artists and they asked, the band members to collectively come up with an idea of what the art is going to be like. You don't get this here. Instead, you get a really interesting piece of media that you decipher on your own. And that's what I hope to get more out of with indie rock albums, or specifically just indie albums in general. Another thing that I need to mention is that this playlist is all over the place. It's like if I made an indie rock album playlist. But, I use my common sense. Why the hell is Billy Joel on here? Why the hell is Muse on here? That's not here or there. What I mean by that is like I listen to a whole bunch of music, so I just kind of throw it all in one playlist. But you don't just call this indie rock / bangers playlist, and then you have, it's all over the place. Fix your playlist. But hey, thank you for including this, because I would have never expected to talk about this for any other reason. Outside of, because I already forgot the name of the cover, and here it is. So yeah. That's all. Peace.